Hello, Martin Luther Summer Theology class. I want to talk to you about something that comes up when we read the book of Job. It's something called theodicy. The word theodicy comes from two Greek words that you don't need to know, but it means justifying God or giving an answer for God. See, when we read the book of Job, it brings up a question called the problem of evil, which is, how could God let things like this happen? How could God let bad things happen? Maybe you've heard this question before. Maybe you've even asked this question before. When we try to make an answer for God, that's when we get into that thing called theodicy. But when we do that, when we try to answer for God or justify God, it becomes problematic. Here's why. You read those two verses just now, or those two collections of verses that give two ideas about God. One idea says God is all-powerful. God is in charge of everything. The other idea says God is loving. God loves us and cares for us and wants the best for us. Here's how that problem of evil, that trying to justify God's actions, gets us in trouble. There's really, when we say, how could God do something like this or allow something like this, there's really only two options for it, right? Either God is not in control, and that means God is not actually all-powerful, that He doesn't want these things to happen, but they are anyway, so that means God is not all-powerful. Or God does want these things to happen and allows them to happen on purpose, but that would not be very loving, would it? So when we try to justify God, when we try to give the answer for why God is doing these things, or try to make this something that God has done, we're bumping up against either one of those. Either God cannot be in control of things, or God cannot be loving. Here's the best we can do. This is where Job lands. The best we can do is this. We live in a broken world, right? We read this in Genesis 3 when Adam and Eve ate from the tree they weren't supposed to eat from. Sin came into the world, and now we have the effects of that. Now we're stuck under the effects of that. Not forever, but for the time being, we're stuck with that sin because the world is broken, because the world is full of sin, bad things, and unfortunate things happen. So you notice I was very careful not to say anything about God's involvement there. Why? Well, because we talked last week about the hiddenness of God, that some things that God does or allows, we just don't understand why. We just don't know everything there is to know about God. And that's where we are now. When we try to make this understandable for us, when we try to understand or say how God is involved, we get into trouble. We just don't know. All we know for sure is we're stuck with sin for now, but God, in Jesus' death and resurrection, has overcome that. And that's really the answer to our question of what's going on here with evil, is that God has overcome it. On the cross, in the death and the resurrection of Jesus, God has overcome that. And that's the best we can say. That's all we really need to say as well. Thanks.